And then I started buying land, and I'd built a custom home when I was stationed in Las Vegas as a test pilot. I realized that took me, 12 months to get that thing built. So I was doing manufactured homes on permanent foundations, and did about 10 of those. And then I joined a group, and that was doing apartments, buying apartments, and converting them to condos. And in California, we did 900 of these over a course of 5 years. It was great. Our exit strategy was to, when the market turns around, we'll go ahead and ride back into rentals. And everything, we thought we had our backside covered until the recession hit and the FDIC seized our two major banks. And all of a sudden there was no more going from construction loans to long-term rentals. FDIC seized us. Basically, it became part of the Big Short, as you've heard, with AIG got involved. And anyway, we were out. So that left a mark. When you take risks, and everybody talks about you taking risks, well, then when you get stung like that kind of put me back in a mood of rethinking, because I did not like to see our condo buyers, losing their homes, and to see investors losing their money. I mean, it was very hard.
Welcome to the Builder Straight Talk podcast with your host, Michael Creaso. Get the unfiltered truth from the trenches of construction, real estate, and funding. This episode is made possible by our sponsor, Sound Capital, funding built for builders.
Well, hey there, my friend Evan. I want to welcome you to Builder Straight Talk. After reading your bio and some of the stuff that you've done, I don't know if you should be on a builder show or on Ripley's Believe It or Not, man. You've covered so much
My
in your
pleasure.
career.
Doing
But first
great.
of all, I'd like to
Here in
welcome
Southern
you.
California,
And
where
how
the
you doing?
weather's wonderful.
Yeah, so when I'm alluding to wild adventures, almost in the top left-hand corner of the screen, I think that kind of is a tip-off to what you used to do in a previous life. Tell us a little
So I
bit about
started out
that.
as a
You
Kansas
as a
farm boy, but I
fighter
took
pilot.
that
How
to the
cool
Air
is that?
Force after college, and absolutely loved it. The goal was to fly F16s. And actually, the goal was to be an Air Force pilot, but I actually got to fly F-16s. So flew F-16s active duty for 15 years. I got to drop bombs every day of Desert Storm. I was a mission commander, led the forces to combat every day except for day 33, which I led the squadron party, which we desperately needed. But did that in yeah, yeah.
Mission commander. Wow. So what
So
does that mean to us
when I
lay
showed up
people?
in
How many
Spain as
people
a
would be
brand
under your
new
command?
second lieutenant wingman, I watched my roommates after 2 years of being in Spain were getting shipped back to be basic instructor pilots back in Oklahoma and Texas, etc. And I loved Spain. It was so much fun. We were flying, in USAFE, the United States Air Forces in Europe. And I asked my boss, can I stay here for a second tour? So that would give me 4 years. And he goes, if you stay here for 4 years, we had a triple dock squadron. So our first mission was nuclear weapons. Second was air to ground, conventional weapons. And third was air to air. So flying air to air. Because I'll upgrade you to flight lead and instructor in all three. And then mission commander, which basically you lead people into combat. Typically, I was leading a 4-ship, could be 8-ship, could be 16. But I was the newest, by far the newest. I became a mission commander in June of 1990. And literally on August 2nd of 1990, Saddam invaded Kuwait. And we were deployed into Qatar. You hear a lot about Qatar. But we flew 12 F-16s from Madrid, Spain, to Qatar, and we were the first Western military to be in Qatar since they became a country in 1970, and they segregated from England. And so it was amazing. What an experience. But so that was Desert Storm. But then I left after Desert Storm. My squadron commander nominated me for weapons school, which is the Navy calls it Top Gun. The Navy's is a 5-week course. Ours is a 5-month course where instructors learn to teach instructors. So I went off to Nellis Air Force Base and did Top Gun that year, and then went off to Misawa, Japan, where I was a squadron weapons officer, a wing weapons officer, advanced programs chief, and I led the conversion from the old Block 30 F-16s to the Block 50 F-16s. Then I went off to Nellis, and I was a test pilot for 3 years, onto the staff, and then I got out of active duty. So, in a nutshell.
Holy jump. Did you actually see,
Oh yeah.
what's the word I'm
Oh
looking, I don't
yeah.
want to say
I drop
combat,
bombs
but
every day
were
at
you
Desert
actually
Storm.
engaged in the fight?
Got shot at by surface to air missiles. Never was closer than 300 miles to another enemy aircraft. Quite honestly, but no, got shot at every day by AAA man pads. The shoulder held SAMs got shot at just about every day.
Jim, well, how do you make the transition from high adrenaline behind a stick, now you're behind a desk? Like,
Sitting on the
yeah,
tractor as a
have you
farm
got
boy
like pedals on the
was
floor that we
basically
don't
create a
see or
real
anything
estate
like that?
company
Or
when I was 12 years old. I said, that's what I'm going to do. And then when I was in college, I met commander of the Thunderbirds and immediately went to the recruiter the next day and decided I could fit 15 years of my life into being an Air Force pilot while I'm young, and then can come back to real estate later on. But I always wanted to be a capitalist. I always wanted to not be a burden on the American people by being a part of the government, but to be a capitalist, to create jobs, to create wealth, to create, and to do things better while I'm here on this earth. Yeah,
amen to capitalism, I
it
say.
was
And
an
by the way, in
absolute
all
joy. Loved
sincerity,
it.
thank you for your service. I know that almost sounds cliche, but wow, 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 wow. Well, how did you then, right now, you've transitioned into being from the cutting edge of flying aircrafts at the speed of sound. Now you're at the cutting edge of home building with
That
what you're
was that was a
doing
longer
with
transition.
modular
So when I
homes.
first got
So
out
tell us a little
of
bit
the
about
active
that. How did that
duty,
come
I
to
went to
be?
work for my father-in-law in rock, sand, and gravel, so building materials in California. That's how I ended up here. And then I started buying land, and I built a custom home when I was stationed in Las Vegas as a test pilot. I realized that took me, 12 months to get that thing built. So I was doing manufactured homes on permanent foundations and did about 10 of those, and then I joined a group and that was doing apartments, buying apartments and converting them to condos. And in California we did 900 of these over a course of 5 years. It was great. Our exit strategy was to, when the market turns around, we'll go ahead and revert
Wow.
right back into rentals and everything. We thought we had our backside covered until the recession hit and the FDIC seized our two major banks. And all of a sudden, there was no more going from construction loans to long-term rentals. FDIC seized us. Basically, it became part of the Big Short, as you've heard. With AIG got involved, and anyway, we were out. So that left a mark. When you take risks, and everybody talks about you're taking risks. Well, then when you get stung like that, that kind of put me back in a mood of rethinking, because I did not like to see our condo buyers, losing their homes, and to see investors losing their money. I mean, it was very hard. So I went back to a place where I was comfortable in life, meaning I actually went back to the Air Force Reserves, got my security clearance back, and joined a reserve unit part time. Then I went to Raytheon as a defense contractor and was doing some incredible stuff with Raytheon, with command and control systems, primarily in the Middle East, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, also Korea, Taiwan, and went back to that world until I could figure out how could I make a move into real estate again after I kind of get back into a place where, solidify my existing situation, get back on my feet and to move forward. And all along the way, I was looking for, as my dad used to say, my dad was a home builder and a farmer growing up, teacher. I mean, he did everything. He goes, why are we still building with sticks and stones? We're building, with logs and rocks. Now we're building with 2x4s and concrete. And so he said, why are we still building with sticks and stones? There's got to be better materials. And he tried a lot of different things. He tried to build with SIPs, structurally insulated panels, ICFs, insulated concrete forms. He built with aerated concrete. He did a gunite spot creek. He did a lot of innovative things as I was growing up, but he couldn't ever make any of them work. But that always stuck in the back of my head that there's got to be a better way to build. And so I had actually come up with a thought of we should be building with composites, foam cores with composite shells. I came up with a prototype in my garage. I took it to Kansas State University where I grew up, and I go, I haven't seen anything on the market like this. Kansas State had a a department that is Advanced Manufacturing Institute at Kansas State. Brett Lance runs the thing. And I said, is this something that would be feasible to build a home out of? And he looked at it and basically said, oh, yeah, hell yes. We can build out of this. He goes, I would formulate it in the computer. We'll go ahead and concoct the formula for it. We'll print it out with a 3D printer. We'll destruct it. And, we knew it was going to take probably $1.5 million, $2 million to get it to the market. Well, in the interim, I found some guys in Canada, JD Composites up in Nova Scotia. They were covered by Popular Mechanics, Forbes, Fortune magazine. They were in over 120 publications where they built the first home in the world out of recycled plastic using composites. And so that's available. So that was in 19. And so actually I went to Canada, went up to Nova Scotia. I was commuting back and forth between Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and our Raytheon corporate back in Boston, and made a short trip up to Nova Scotia and met with those guys and saw what they were building with, and I absolutely fell in love with it. Loved it. So it's a composite shell, foam core. They're using PET foam, which is the same foam, or the foam was made out of recycled pop bottles, water bottles. And so, just tremendous product. They took that into a wind tunnel up to 325 miles per hour, an 8-foot by 8-foot panel with less than a quarter-inch deflection on it. So they've withstood hurricanes at this point. They've built over 45 homes now. But the problem was in the United States, it wasn't tested. And so I began the process of testing, and that it takes forever. So I'm working with International Code Council, ICC, working with different test labs. And along the way, since it was taking so long, I met Modular Brands and Harrison and realized that we had started about the same time frame where I built a prototype. He had actually gone and searched the world and found other companies that were making this product since 2004 and found the best and brightest and found polymer engineers and was importing it in. And he already had all the testing done and approved in all 50 states. And so now I'm working with both companies, primarily with Modular, but to bring composites to the building industry.
Is there like a fine line? Like, so you're working with a company in Nova Scotia, you're working with Modular. I'll wager that they both have their own proprietary mix, if you will. Like one has a better chocolate chip cookie than the other.
So open disclosure.
How do you walk that fine line that you're not
about
in a conflict of interest, so to speak?
The primary engineer from Nova Scotia and JD Composites down to Chattanooga and met with Harrison. And honestly, at this point, it would make sense. The composites that they're building with in Nova Scotia are significantly higher priced. So for them at this point, to get to have the testing done, if they want to sell in the U.S., it would make sense for them to actually use the Modular Brands panels because the testing is done. It actually makes sense for them to buy some of these panels and use them up there because of the price point. But honestly, they're working on some maritime stuff. They're using like oil storage for containment. They're building in extreme environments, etc. And they have their set of customers, but we've made Modular Brands panels, available to them, 100% available to them. And I see some synergies coming because I think there's some things that they're doing that we should adapt and things that we're doing that they're going to adapt as well. I think it's going to be a good, open relationship.
Do you see any potential of the two camps joining forces
but I see us
under one banner?
being strategic partners. That's a gauge mark.
Well, it's a big ocean out there, so there are plenty of potential clients for both. So that's a good mindset to have. The one thing that kind of makes me laugh, it all starts in a garage, and I'm wondering, what is it about the entrepreneurial spirit
you don't have any money
that gets kickstarted by the fumes of a garage?
All
like
you
how
have
many
is
businesses?
Your garage, Steve Jobs, they started in a garage, and Bill Gates, all those guys. But yeah, you don't have any money, so you do what you can to start out. And I've had it explained to me that there's two ways to really grow a company. One is to get a bunch of investors and go big or go home. You have a very short amount of time to get the thing to go public. But the problem with that is you don't learn all the lessons along the way. Start it up in your garage and do it, with your own money and create some income. You learn so many lessons along the way that are incredibly important. Plus, you don't give away your equity. And that's the mindset that I'm at. I've retired Air Force now. I'm retired Raytheon. This is like my mission in life. I want to do this and I want to bring this product to the market, but I'm not looking at an IPO or anything. I'm looking at getting some customers absolutely in love with the product. And that's where I'm at right now.
When you look back to your career in the military and you're trained to be a leader, disciplined, forward thinking, risk taker, obviously, if you're pushing the envelope in a jet, are there any of those skill sets that you see that you've drawn upon that you're now using in what you're
Well,
doing?
I know my
And let's call it the
dad,
next
like I
chapter of
said,
your
was a
life, which is
farmer,
working with modular?
was a teacher, was a innovator. He wasn't afraid to make changes. And I think that's important. You got to be unafraid to fail. And you've got to go out there and, push the envelope. If you're ever going to do anything worthwhile, you have to push that envelope. You have to speak your mind and push the envelope. So that's always been my mindset growing up. And the Air Force was a perfect place to practice that because they want you to come up with new tactics. They want you to think, how can we solve this situation with the equipment and the people that we have? But think outside the box. It's always been the advantage of the American soldier has been able to develop tactics and develop some way to win with the assets that you have. So
It's ironic that you say being able to
yeah,
solve problems with what you have. I was just watching Apollo 13 the other night. And when things were just, everything's going wrong, and basically in mission control, the engineers get together. Okay, here's a box of stuff. This is exactly what they have in the console. Well,
yeah.
if only we had this. No, no, no. It's not a matter of if. Here's what you got. Solve the problem. And they've got duct tape or whatever it is, but somehow they're able to piece everything together based on what they have to
When
make
I
the
was
mission
13, I
successful and
actually
bring the
started my
astronauts
own
home.
farming
Same kind of
operation.
mindset that you're applying here, it looks
But
like.
I used to, at 13 years old, before I had a driver's license, I was driving 45 miles to the farm. And I would show up and I'd have a flat tire on the tractor and I had a bubble of air so I could get the tire blown up, roll the tractor to get it started because it wouldn't start. You're always solving problems on the farm. That's why farmers are such good fighter pilots generally. They're used to running big equipment their entire lives, and flying a jet's just another piece of equipment.
I think that's probably the core of every entrepreneur slash builder, because the builder's constantly putting out fires. Hopefully they don't get too big. They're constantly problem solving. They're ruling everything. Now, mind you, once they get bigger and they
Yeah.
start
Well, when
delegating,
somebody
but
says
up
no,
until they
you'll
get to
never
that
get
point, they're
anywhere.
doing it all.
You're
So
always going to be
same kind
told
of
no.
mindset.
People are always going to hold it down for sure.
Getting back to that idea of failure, the trick is fail
Yeah, if
quickly
you
and
can.
move forward.
Sometimes you get hit over the head with a monster, too. But
Wow.
you try to fail quickly and move on. But you can't be afraid. You don't put the company at jeopardy either. And that's something I'm doing now. It's would have been very easy to spend $300,000-$400,000, on testing of the panels, the Canadian panels, and be left with something you couldn't sell. Could have put everything at jeopardy right there. So been very careful to take very calculated steps forward. And when I found, well, like I could have taken my own product, tried to take my own product to the market. But when I found the Canadians, I go, well, they've already done prototyping testing. Dave Saunier up there was 35 years of composites, building with them. He was building custom boats for the fishing industry up in Nova Scotia. So he had all this experience working with composites. And he said, building in a dynamic situation like boat building, it's one thing, but for a house, this is a no brainer. The composites were great. And now with Harrison, with working with the companies that Harrison has brought with modular brands, now we have the scale of the factories. We have 10 factories in Brazil, making panels. So we have the scale, we have all the
So are you
no, I'm
officially
officially
a
a member
member
of
of Modular,
Modular.
or are you your own entity?
Business development, kind of a generic term.
And what would your
Yeah.
function there be? Got it. Okay. Do you find that we're kind of on I want to say the cutting edge. I'm going to reference back to what your dad was saying that, we're building with sticks and stones. There's got to be a better way of doing it. Do you notice now there's all kinds of new technologies coming out? You've got 3D printed homes. You've got what you're doing with modular. Do you think that the traditional way of building is slowly being put aside to make way for this? And I guess the other question would be, are you
Big
getting
builders,
pushback
D.R.
from
Hortons, I know
builders
that
that don't want to adapt
Modular
to the new
Brands and JD
technologies and the new
Composites
ways
have
of doing
both
things?
been approached by D.R. Horton, and they're not willing to take the leap into composites unless it's 20% cheaper across the board. I mean, they have all of their contractors, they have the entire system where they're building, tens of thousands of homes a year. They're not wanting to go out there and do something different unless it's significantly cheaper. We look at it from the standpoint of, we've gone in composites from, I was in the defense industry. We were using composites in satellites. We were using composites in aircraft. In the F-16 that I flew with, carbon fiber tail. We were using it in the weapons we were making in Raytheon. We're using it now across the fence. We're using it in sports. You see it in helmets and all kinds of equipment. So composites have become more and more prevalent. The cost relative to the cost of constructing with sticks and stones, we're at an intersection now where really the products are about the same cost. And now we're going to see leaps and bounds of the time. So I always say if we can do it better product, better quality, we can do it faster and easier, we can do it cheaper, and we can do it with a sustainable material. Our cores are all sustainable. You can do a core that's a recycled plastic, so very sustainable. But we're now at the point where the raw materials are the same cost. I know on our website we say the roofing, if you can imagine, we can do it with 70% less labor because we're not using trusses in our system. We're not using sheeting. We're not using felt paper. We're not using shingles. You can just put our panels up there and then you can handle it with 2 people or 4 people or whatever. These panels are so light, you could just put them up. Incredibly durable if you think about composites. So now you can manhandle them up there where we are putting a sheeting on the outside cover, but 70% less labor. And we're going to get better. In the framing, same thing, maybe 50% savings. We could pre-plumb the walls with electrical, with plumbing, have the holes ready for conduit, etc. There's going to be so much more we can do, but there's the customer acceptance right now. So you have the customer acceptance that you have to deal with.
I was going to ask you
Not very
two
many.
parts. Like, are the customers aware that this is an alternative?
Yeah.
And have
So
they been saying,
no,
hey,
you're
why
not
aren't we
seeing it. I
seeing this in
mean,
our neighborhoods?
it is very rare. So you have a large hurdle to overcome. I know the guys in Canada, when they build a home, they said roof wise, you could put a pitched roof on it. No problem. We can do that. We can put a shingle on it, whatever, but why don't you put a flat roof on it and then you could put a barbecue up there and a deck and have a view of the bay? So most of their homes up there have a flat roof or a sloped roof just because it's why do you need to have the pitched roof? Typically it was for runoff and for water and all that stuff. So, but I brought that back, to my hometown in Kansas and mentioned the flat roof, and they saw some videos, YouTube up there, and they're like, oh my God, it's a mandatory that you have to have a pitched roof, for example. You go on the interior walls based on fire code. I mean, we could get away with no drywall. I mean, we're going to have coatings, et cetera, that you don't have to put drywall, but the accepted is to go ahead and put furring strips and put drywall on the inside. We can do that. And that's typically what we do for customer acceptance right now. And to meet existing fire code because it's all set up for drywall and 2x4s and 2x6s. Outside, we could just paint. In Canada, they're just painting the outside of the building with a 40-year acrylic paint. Well, we could put on hardy plank, we could put on, stucco, we could do whatever you want on that exterior. They used recycled aluminum, siding. You can do that. Floors, you could put on laminates, you could put on whatever you want, or you could use some type of an epoxy, or you could use a stain. So you can see there's going to be really attractive ways that we can construct homes in the future that are going to really minimize the time required to build and also the money because you won't have all these third party tradesmen coming in and Anyway, we could use products that are going to be a coating or whatever that could be a lot cheaper. That's the future.
How hard is it for the trades to make the adjustment for building? Let me go back. Is it kind of a hybrid build that you're using your composite materials with traditional building, or is it sort of like an all or
That's a
nothing
great
approach?
question
And how tough
because
is it for
now the
contractors and
Canadian
builders
product,
to
they're
adjust to
actually
that or
fiberglassing
adopt it?
all the panels together. And so they said we have to, it's Nova Scotia. It's always condensation on the panels every morning. So we have to have a sunny day. You have to have a competent person. It could take 2-3 weeks with a competent person to do it. The system that Modular Branch uses, Ed Jolly, the main construction expert, he'll come out and he goes, if it's a competent contractor, within an hour, especially if they've built with SIPs before, 15 minutes, he goes, they get it. They get it. It's super simple. And the fact that you can carry these things around, you can cut them with a regular saw, you can drill into them, you can do whatever you want. We're using adhesives. It's a very simple system. However, you know, do it yourselfers beware because it's a very exact panel, meaning it is 100% flat, 100% true. You don't want to have a wavy concrete slab to put it on. That could cause a problem. So you need to be exact and precise with everything you do. But if you do that, it's very easy and fast to construct.
We should probably set a bit of a context because you've mentioned Nova Scotia a few times. For people that have never been there, imagine Maine, but on the backside of the moon. So everything that happens up there is extreme. Snow is extreme. It's not unusual for them to get 12, 13 feet of snow in Nova Scotia. They're right
Right.
on the ocean, so they're getting gales of phenomenal wind force coming through. As you mentioned, the salt, so that you've got the corrosive action happening. Then summertime, you've got extreme sun. So absolutely, they need something that's going to be able to handle all these elements. But again, to
And
something
the
you would
other
appreciate,
location they're building
everything's
in
to the
is
extreme up there.
Lloydminster, Alberta. So they're on the border of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and extreme weather up there, obviously with the cold. They had a customer that wanted to compare their existing home with a SIP home, and you can imagine our home is very, very airtight. And so they wanted to measure for a full year the energy usage, and our home was 66% more energy efficient, used a third of the energy that the other home used. So I know Dave, the main engineer, says don't put a fireplace in them; that it'll be way too hot. You'll cook the inside of the home. You have to be careful with it.
So if you're building, so the other day I had an interview with a gentleman by the name of Brian Johnson. His company is Synergy
Okay.
360, and their focus is on building what they call the healthy home. And their concern is about off gassing, from the furniture, from the carpet, like
Right.
everything. It's almost like living in Australia where everything's nice, but it can kill you. And so they're trying to re-engineer the perfect home that is healthy on the inside. So I guess my $1 million question is, since you're working with composites, is there any
So the
fear
materials
of
are very
outgassing or
carefully
sorry,
selected.
off-gassing? Are
My
there any
understanding is
negative
48
effects?
hours, there's off gassing when it comes out of the factory, and then it's no more off gassing. Yeah, you're 100% right. The formaldehydes that came out of the trailer homes that they provided after the hurricanes, Katrina, they had those trailer homes that were off gassing with formaldehyde. That was a bad situation. A lot was learned from that. So yeah, so 48 hours, then there's no more off gassing. Of course, plastic, PET plastic, the foams, that's 100% inert. We drink out of those water bottles all day, and they no odor to them or anything. So very safe materials.
Are you guys doing your own builds at all right now, or are
So
you
that's
strictly
Yeah.
supplying
So
the
Harrison is
materials for
building
builders
a
to
small
do the
development
job?
up in Chattanooga right now, and he has a couple others that he wants to partner with. And I'm actually looking for partners on the West Coast. Have a couple that I want to work with, and I feel if you're introducing a new product, rather than trying to sell them something to say, let's go into business together, I'll fund it or I'll fund part of it. Let's partner up. So yes, I'm looking to do that. My goal is to build either, ADUs or custom homes or multifamily, build a fourplex, and then have some open houses to where we could show people and open up the financials so where they could see what everything costs, but let people see what we're doing. And I'll take some of that risk up front, with the builder And I'm looking for other, builders, developers to partner up with if they want to, join us. But I'm looking at West Coast because most of our product is coming in through container ship. So any place there's a port, we can ship cheaply into any port right now. Probably ideal.
This could be your lucky day, young man, because the company that sponsors this show, Sound Capital, I guess I should do a quick infomercial for them. They're a builders financing company, and the unique difference, aside from their philosophy, is when they guarantee funding, that funding is guaranteed, unlike what you experience, that the Fed can step in and suddenly turn off the spout and you're left there with your pants down. So Sound Capital is built for builders. But that being said, they've got customers all up and down the West Coast. That's a conversation we'll have
Outstanding.
after this
Yeah.
interview, maybe some introductions for you. All right. And talk to me like I'm six here for a second, Evan. I'm just trying to wrap my head around. I understand the utility of what you're building. Is there a price point? If I'm a custom builder and I'm used to building
100%.
homes that are in the multi-millions, is this something I'm even going to entertain?
No,
Or will that, what's the word
you're
I'm
not
looking
going
at?
to
Will that
notice a
cheapen the look of
difference,
my home? Is this
And like I
something I'm
said,
not
you can
even going
put
to entertain?
any features on the outside. You can paint it, you can stucco it, you can put siding on it, you can put brick on it, brick facing on the inside. If it has drywall face, same with roofing, same with flooring. So you'll never know. The home that I went to up in Nova Scotia, spent the night in, I just noticed it's extremely quiet. It's made out of foam. There's no studs between the panels, so there's no thermal bridging. You don't notice that until you go to, pay for your electric bill or your gas bill. But yeah, I tell people there's no difference. It's just a building material. We're replacing the SIP or we're replacing the studs with a composite SIP. So it's just for the builder, though. If you can get by with a whole lot less time on site, a whole lot less labor on site, in and out. And for the developer, if you're tied up with the fewer inspections, if you can get on site, get off site, and get out of the construction phase and right into the living or renting space, that's great. Also, if you're, say, Marriott and you want to build a hotel and you're responsible for the operating costs, our operating costs are going to be significantly lower. We believe but we're new enough we can't show 20 years of results, but your maintenance costs should be significantly lower over time. You're going to have a smaller HVAC unit. Your water lines are going to be insulated. It's just a whole bunch of little things that we think are going to add up to lower maintenance costs, lower operating costs over the long term.
So if I were to take a band of your musketeers and they show up in the Partridge family bus and I say, okay, guys, here's the plan, 1,500 square foot home. Next to me is another site. Bob the builder is building the identical home using traditional materials and traditional methods. If we hit the stopwatch, and then I've also got a calculator, what would be the
So we
big
would take
difference
your
in terms
plans.
of
We would go
time
ahead and
and
one
money
day we'd
if
have
you
it
compared the two?
panelized, figure out how many panels, what they're going to look like. If you're good with the order, we'd ship it off to our manufacturing plant. And that's where you're going to see real benefits in the future is we are going to be you creating the panels, cutting them out on a CNC machine, and it's just cutting a hole out where the doorway is, cutting a hole out where the window is, cutting a bevel down, where the roof meets at the peak, whatever it might be. So we'll bundle it up and get it on a ship, and 5 weeks later you're going to get a container that's going to show up on site, unload it, and we can start right away. Now we could put it on a concrete slab, we could put it on a stem wall foundation. That's up to you. We have videos of the guys up in Canada are going on helical piers where they're just swinging panels into place on helical piers with a frame, and they make the floor and the foundation basically are out of composite panels as well. So in 2 days, we're assembled. 2 to 3 days, we're assembled. And then you come in with your trades, and however fast your tradesmen can go. But yeah, instead of cutting out every piece of wood for length for the wall or headers, none of that. They just all the panels just show up, and you're off and running. So it's a whole lot quicker process with fewer people.
So correct me if I'm wrong here. Is it fair to say that the cost for the materials may be slightly
On
higher than
time,
traditional
I would say
materials, but
we're
where you're
right
really
there
making the
with cost
savings
materials
is
as
on
well.
time?
So I think we're right there. depending upon your build. But yes, we're very, very close on pricing now.
So would this be a position, again, are you at that point now where I say, God bless the rich people? And I say that because I think of flat panel TVs. And when they first came out, they were, $7,000, $8,000 each. And they cost that much because they couldn't perfect getting it right. So you had so many that were done poorly that were, obviously
Right.
thrown into the heap. So for every, let's say, 10 that came down the production line, maybe only one worked. So you had to have the money to be able to afford that. So here the rich people come in, they can afford to buy that TV. And
Exactly.
that facilitates the companies now to be able to produce them on scale. So the average person like you and me, you probably have more money in your couch cushions than I do. But the point is, average persons can now afford this. Do you see that coming? That once we hit critical
And
mass,
I think that you could think
that
of
the
the rich
cost
people
to
as you
production
describe
comes
in
down even
your
lower?
example as the defense companies, as the satellite builders. They've already been building with this stuff for decades. The shipbuilders, the car manufacturers, so they have been doing a lot of the legwork on this. We're using polymers now that are dry. So dry resins that adhere better to fiberglass strands. That's nothing that you would have thought of, 30 years ago. But yeah, our engineers are doing that kind of thing. We're using thermoplastics. We're using different skins that are lighter and stronger. I was in New York over the weekend for my daughter's graduation, and I was looking at that city thinking of that's a city, really that was built around Carnegie steel. And, think about that leap from brick and iron to steel. And now you see all that steel 150 years old that needs to be replaced now. But that was a huge leap to go from the iron and brick to steel. Now we're going to make that further leap from steel and wood to composites, and it's going to be a bigger and bigger role. And we've already had a lot of the initial investments already been made, but we're going to continue to get better. Things like AI, you're going to be able to take your computer, design your house, hit a button, and basically your button will say, well, what county are you in, and it will make sure it meets building code, and your design will, in essence, have all the engineering parameters required in it. And it's going to get shipped off to the city for approval. Hopefully, they'll be using AI. And they'll just look at it and go, it'll get approved, like that. Wouldn't that be a dream? But that's going to be the future, I do believe, where all this stuff will be automated using AI. And then we ship that same file over to the manufacturing plant where the panels will be, cut out and delivered to site. And the assembly will go really quick.
Have you found that your innovations being cutting edge, are you being
Sure,
hindered at all by
sure.
policy and
California,
existing code
we're working to
from
get
state to
approvals
state?
here because it's probably the hardest state in the United States other than Florida. But we built a home in the Bahamas, and so it's a category 5 hurricane rated. I'm looking at homes in Kansas and Nebraska. They want high winds because of tornadoes. California, obviously, we're working right now, and we have a home that's going to be going into Northern California here in 2 weeks. So 2 weeks we're going to build here, all approved. So that's one area. Now I'm working currently with LA County. So if we can get approvals in LA County, that's another big step forward. And then it just should get easier and easier. But like you said, we're going to have to, don't underestimate just getting customer acceptances. It's going to be a good product over long term. That's why I've said, well, I'll build with you. Let's build this together. There's going to be champions out there that have been looking for this, like my dad, like myself, that have been looking for something else. There's going to be people that want to build with the recycled material. There's going to be government requirements that are going to require buildings to be, LEED certified. They're going to be energy compliant, to be HUD compliant, to meet these certifications. And they're going to say, well, they're going to look at us as different initially, but we're going to have to make them comfortable with these materials and show them that it's better, faster, cheaper, and sustainable.
Yeah, I would think California be shutting down the streets and getting a parade in place to bring you guys in, because if your speed to build is that much better, and especially now after the fires, you would be a natural fit to come in there and start rolling out housing. Has there been any kind of what can I say? The sales
Yes,
inquiries, have they
yes,
gone
getting a
up
lot of
proportionate
inquiries.
to what's happened
But
in
the
California?
question comes back, can we get permitting? And the government says they're going to be right there with us and they're going to expedite these permits. And I went up to Pacific Palisades and that area, and the EPA was in there and sifting through every inch of soot looking for lithium batteries. They're looking for any toxins. So you have to wait. The dump trucks are lining up waiting to get rubble, but the EPA is all over this, looking for any contaminants, that kind of thing. And the reality is, it's going to be 2-3 years. Is the reality.
It's the
Yeah.
bureaucracy.
So
It's like having a barn fire and they come in, they wonder what the cow had for dinner that night. It's got nothing to do with the cleanup and rebuild. It just speaking of the fire, how do your homes then
we've got an
respond to
excellent
heat
article that came
relative
out
to
on
traditional
our
builds like, let's say,
panels
brick
here
and
about
stick?
3 weeks ago. We had a PR release in the LA Times that actually showed, because you can put a direct flame onto a wall. It's currently a 30-minute wall, tested 30 minutes up to 60 minutes. We can, change the DNA of the skin to come up with, different fire resistance levels. You can coat it with ceramic coatings. You can put a cement fiber, hardy plank on the outside of it. There's all kinds of ways that, the our panel is a whole lot better than direct exposure to a 2x4. Hey, let's lead off with that. So wood obviously is going to burn. Ours, it's airtight, so typically the fire comes in through the eave. That's not going to happen with our home. If the fire hits our wall, the after running a torch on it for X number of minutes, and I haven't seen the test myself, so I need to be careful. But you may get some melting of the foam on the inside with extreme temperature, but it's very, very resistant. Fiberglass is inherently resistant to flame. So then we can also, put drywall on the inside. We can put coatings on the outside. So we can do whatever, is needed to meet fire code, extreme fire code.
How does it stand up from a longevity point of view? A traditional home, if built right,
Yes,
will be 100
but we
years,
don't
let's
have any
say.
data,
Do
that
yours
says it's
exceed
been
that?
in the air for 100 years. So we say that basically lifetime, but knowing that as long as you keep it properly coated from UV rays, the fiberglass from UV rays, you have an indefinite lifespan.
Are there any limitations to how these homes are built? Like when you say that your roofing system is different, that there's no trusses, does that open up a whole new realm
Yes,
of possibilities in terms of
creativity.
the
I've been working with
architecture and
Kansas
planning
State
that you're doing?
University, and they're very excited for us to get off the ground and running and see some product on the ground because their College of Architectural Engineering, their College of Architecture, their College of Design, all of that, you know, to be able to be incredibly creative with cantilevers, with different spans. You look at our product and it's pound and a half per square foot on a 6-inch panel, very light, but you can be standing. We've got a home in Chattanooga where you're 14 feet out and standing on this panel, and there's just no give to it. It's incredibly strong. So the things that you can do with it are tremendous. And I always say we can go probably 3 stories without an interior skeleton, and with any steel or any interior skeleton, probably 3 stories, maybe 4. But after that, in Korea, where they use a lot of these panels, they can build with a steel structure and then they use the panels on the exterior. Think about the savings in weight. So now you're using a whole lot less weight, so you can use less steel, less foundation on a tall building. And these things are more energy efficient, so you can use them throughout the entire building. So that goes into the calculation and more flexibility for the architects and designers.
You mentioned Harrison's got a build on the go. Is there any one that's been built so far that you guys,
I
like,
think the
even to this
Bahamas
date, you
build,
stand back and say,
the
"Holy
Bahamas
jumper, we
build,
can't believe we
it
actually pulled
takes
that one off."
months and months and
Like it's
months,
so
years
cutting.
to build over there.
Yeah.
And they built that actually in modular pieces, put it on barges and shipped it over and built the home in 5 weeks. And it's got some really good pictures on our website. I think you're going to see some great pictures coming out of Chattanooga here very shortly. And this Bishop House that we have coming up here, by the middle of June, we should have it assembled. So, as long as this whole business has been around, we're still getting projects, or
So
we're
that
still in our infancy. quite honestly. That's Harrison. Yeah. So Harrison is building
So
several
Chattanooga
there.
is one that you
And
guys
also, if you go to
built,
our
or is
website,
it some?
mdlrbrands.com, you'll see on there where they took an existing historical home that was a 2-story home with a historic stone basement. Well, they knocked the top floor of it off, and then they built a brand new modern home around the outside of it with these beautiful views of the Tennessee River. Just gorgeous, and big spans, big roofs. Doing some of these creative things that you mentioned that we're going to be able to do with these panels.
Yeah, you've educated me because I had this vision in my head that it was like cookie cutters, that you
You
were
can cut it
limited.
out. It's
But the fact that you can
just a
play with the
building
roof,
material
it
that
just changes the game
we have all
completely.
kinds of ways of attaching it and utilizing it. It's very flexible, and not just with, I mentioned ADUs and custom homes, and I want to build some fourplexes because we can still build it as residential, but we could build 20 plexes or 100plex, whatever. Ag buildings, looking at, grow houses, for whatever type of use, data centers, energy efficiency in data centers, looking at it for climate controlled self storage, and then, Marriott's or any type of commercial building. So really, it's very, very flexible.
I want you to think for a second that you're back to being a mission commander. And if you were to formulate a plan to take this out to the public right now, what would be like the most audacious, aggressive play that you think you could make to really get this out there quickly? Money's not an object. You don't have to worry about the competition. Like, how do you actually get out there and disrupt the industry enough that the consumers are looking at it, the builders are
I don't
looking
know if
at
I
it and
want to
thinking,
do
this
that.
is something that we really
I
need to
am
dig
more
into?
of the mindset, let's build some fourplexes, some eightplexes, and introduce it to a community, get the builders comfortable with it. If I were to go, big scale, you'd probably want to align yourself with a large builder and have them build a major, center of some type, hotel or whatever with it. Just let people see the construction going up and show the numbers of what it costs to build and the projected operating cost. And then we would get more and more data on it. When they see the operating costs, think about recently President Trump was in Qatar and he announced that Qatar Airways is going to buy over 200 new 787s from Boeing because, as a lot of my friends are airline pilots, there's about a 13% savings on fuel by going with a composite airplane like a 787. It puts the old Airbuses, it puts the old 730s out of business because those fuel savings on the longer hauls. So they're upgrading over 200 airplanes. That's where you're going to see with composites upcoming. I've seen, I've owned mobile home parks before. I've owned other types of real estate, and it just crushes you when you have somebody in an old mobile home. You go, here's a mobile home for very cheap. You can live in this, and they get an $800 electric bill, at the end of the month, and they go 2 months without paying their bill, and then they get evicted. So we've got to become more energy efficient. And I look at the world. I lived in Japan. I lived in Saudi Arabia. I've lived in Qatar. Those homes
Do
aren't
you,
insulated. Those homes in Japan, we froze our butts off in Japan, because all those homes were uninsulated, heated with heating oil, incredibly expensive. So you freeze. So much of the world is built like that. You go to Saudi Arabia, where, the one thing they do have is oil. So the king is able to give people electricity for the most part. So the air conditioners are just running non-stop in that 115-degree heat. Things aren't insulated for the most part. We've got a whole world that we need to rebuild.
do you see this as a solution to the housing shortage problem?
Yeah, we can
Making,
scale.
or I don't want to
I
say
see our
affordable, more
costs
attainable
coming
for the
down
average
further
person?
and further, and I want to see more regional manufacturing. Is, after we can get a foothold on manufacturing, we're going to bring that manufacturing into the US. We're going to use more AI. We're going to use more robotics. We're going to be able to build cheaper and cheaper upcoming, and our methods for assembly are going to be cheaper. All this is, coming up. We got to get a market share first. But yeah, so that would be huge as far as to get people in Brazil out of they're literally living in a lot of places in the world, just a little concrete box, or just horrible housing around the world. We can get you into something that's clean, that's something that's air conditioned and heated. There's so much in the world that needs that. That's great.
Crevices that we.
Well,
So, Evan, if they want to find out more about you,
it's Evan, my first name, Evan, at mdlrbrands.com. Just shoot me an email.
okay, let's pretend that you're at the stick, you're flying, the passenger seat beside you is empty, and we're flying into sunset. Who is the one person, living or dead,
So,
that you'd
Cowboy
want
Bob
sitting there
Delaney,
beside
yeah.
you as you're flying towards the
He was
sunset?
my commandant during weapons school, and he was just phenomenal, And flying the F-16 and in combat, in dogfighting, it's an art. And so you'll have it taught. Everybody teaches it a little bit different. And he used to say, listen to everybody, but you're going to figure out your own way of doing things. And I picked up his way of flying, and he was just amazing. Yeah, he went off to left the Air Force, and he was the one-star general in charge of Northern Watch for a while, and he conducted the largest continuous bombing campaign since World War II in northern Iraq during the desert after southern during Northern Watch. Yeah, Cowboy Bob Delaney. He's amazing.
I don't know how you guys keep your guts in your stomach when you're pulling that many G's, and that in itself
Well,
is
my
an art
neck and
form,
my
how you're
back
able
are,
to just do that stuff. And you become, it's almost like you're basically
in
part of the
Top Gun
plane.
and
You're an
in Top Gun
extension of the
Maverick,
plane. You have
they're
to be
complaining about pulling
able
nine
to do that.
Gs and they're looking straight ahead. The reality is when you're pulling nine Gs, it's because there's an airplane behind you trying to shoot you. And so the seat reclines 30 degrees. You're looking like this at the other airplane, trying to see if he's in range, in plane, and nose and lead. And at that point, then you're going to be janking out of the way. So anyway, my back's all screwed up. My neck's all screwed up, as most F-16 pilots are. But, and you think, oh, you got all this equipment, but it never fails. The mask is cocked off to the side. You have air force feeding shooting into your eye, and your visor's down cutting into your face. It's not so glamorous. It's a very violent.
So have all these like laser sharp precision skills helped you in day-to-day
I
driving?
suppose so.
Evan, my friend, I can say that now. Once again, I want to say thank you again for your service
My
and
pleasure.
for taking
Thanks,
time out
Michael.
today. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Builder Straight Talk. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming fix. Until next time, keep building smarter. This episode is made possible by our sponsor, Sound Capital, funding built for builders.